You are listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, happy Wednesday evening, folks. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my program, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Come on over to Odyssey, see the whole lineup for the day, and find all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio. And at the same time, if you're listening, you can come on over to my YouTube channel to watch the simulcast in video, and also to join our live chat room with the other Intrepheads. And you can go over to youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And come on over and enjoy the fun over there. You can add your 2 cents in the live chat. If you want to just sit and watch, you can do that as well. You don't have to participate in the chat. As a matter of fact, I don't think your name even shows up in the chat unless you click into it. I'm not sure of that, but there you go. All right, folks. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. It's the middle of the week. It's been it's kind of funny. With everything being a little shut down right now, it seems very quiet. And with the kids here home all day long, I got a 10-year-old boy, an 8-year-old girl, and a 5-year-old girl. And those three at home all at once with mom and dad both working at home. And we do that all the time anyway. We work at home without a crisis of any kind. So we're used to being here. We're used to the kids being around, but not usually in long stretches until summertime, when you can open the door and boot them outside because you say, that's enough, I don't want you inside anymore, go outside and play. Happened to me, happened to you when you were a kid, you know what that's like. And so it's been a little close, but other than that, I sometimes have the feeling that I'm always on a Friday or a Saturday. It always feels that way for some reason these days, over the last week especially. And some days it's so quiet around here, it's tranquil. But then, of course, you throw the kids into the mix and that spoils it all. Not really. I love my kids, love spending time with them, but they can sure irritate the hell out of mom while I'm in here working. So hopefully we won't have too many interruptions tonight. So happy Wednesday, hump day. It's the middle of your week, which maybe looks like the beginning and the weekend and the rest of the week to come, as well as next weekend. So it's all kind of blurring together. And so I want to pick up what we've been talking about, but I want to shift gears just a little bit. I want to talk about what's all this stuff about codependency, about narcissism, about our relationships, how all this stuff affects who we are and what we do. This is all things that I think go to personal integrity and personal character. And there is ways in marriages and relationships that we can work through character by working on our conflicts, our strength-based resolutions to things. There's also just personal strength, character strengthening that I think we can all go through, especially me. This is self I'm talking to, as well as you all. I'm not saying, look at my sterling character, and therefore you can have sterling character like mine. I'm not saying that. I'm saying all of this stuff I talk about is all stuff that hits home, too. And so, lest you think I am preaching at anybody, I'm not. I'm talking to all of us, and I'm talking to myself. And so that's why I want to dig into this a little bit more. And so rather than pick up precisely where we left off with codependency and narcissism, I think we got the point yesterday. I started looking through my material, and I thought I'm just going to start repeating myself. So let's shift emphasis a little bit. Let's look at self and building character in self. What is character? How do you define that? Do you believe you have a good character? Do you believe your character needs work? Do you believe you have a bad character? I mean, and some of this is all dependent on how we're perceived out there as well. But what drives you internally? What makes character work? And one of the first things I wanted to do, as you saw the graphic for tonight, it's not the whole show, but it's a big part. It's a part of getting started. The whole idea of Star Trek came to my mind. Star Trek characters are cognitive archetypes. Did you know that? Whether you like Star Trek or not, Rocky Stucci, you got to watch more Star Trek if you want to learn about cognitive archetypes for character building. Now, Gene Roddenberry, when he created the original Star Trek, he skillfully used the 4 key cognitive patterns of the Mindex model. I'm going to explain what that is. Fiction writers for centuries. I mean, think of all the writers that you like and enjoy. Think of modern writers. Think of ancient writers. Think of, when we think of more contemporary, think in the last 100 to 200 years of novels and books that were written that were fiction. These fiction writers for centuries and filmmakers in the modern era have all recognized the dramatic value of character stereotypes. That's standard configurations of personality, behavior, emotional constitution, and they use all of these things to populate their stories. And we see this. There are movies and films and books that will move us to want to do better, or want to be better, or want to be like that, or work on our own character. That's what a good storyteller does. He instills you with something on the inside. And I know a little bit about this because part of my stock and trade is a storyteller when I write my books. And so my non-fic books are different. I still tell stories in those, but my fictional books. And here's a good example is when I wrote The Rollicking Adventures of Tam O'Hare. I started that by telling stories of an Irish rabbit and a Scottish mouse to my little girls, who are now 28. So back when they were 7, you can do the math on that one. Math is hard. I started telling those stories to them. And then one day they wanted to know what Tam looked like, what William the Mouse looked like. We sat on the living room floor, we drew pictures, and I did this painting of Tam O'Hare and Horatio McNutt. And I'm wondering if while we're doing this, I know this takes a little bit of time, but I might be able to show you something here on this. And what this image looked like. The next day, after we were all laying on the living room floor with magic markers and trying to draw what characters looked like, I wanted to come up with a picture of Tam for my kids. And let me see if he's in here, if he's in my files. And it's not letting me do it for some reason. So anyway, I can't seem to import a picture, so that's all right. I should have done it before the show, but I didn't. And so let's carry on. Tam O'Hare, Irish rabbit, but I instilled him with character traits that were character traits that I wanted for myself. Tam was a nobleman, and he was noble. He was an Irish lord, and he had a lot of character and integrity. And he had a young squire, a squirrel named Horatio McNutt, and this was the son of a good friend of his. And remember, this is an anthropomorphized tale, so I told it all with animals. And so Tam wanted to instill character in his young squire, and so he would teach him things. And as he taught him, there are certain elements of my character that came out in Tam. He was honorable. And I felt I was an honorable person. He had integrity, and he wanted to instill those things in him. So when I wrote my own stories about Tam O'Hare, I, of course, here, I found the picture. How about that? Let's see if this is big enough to show you. We'll give this a try. Boom. Boom. Okay, this is Tam O'Hare. This is actually the painting I did for my daughters. When we sat on the living room floor, and the next day I sat down and I did this painting of Tam O'Hare and his young squirrel squire, Horatio McNutt, who Tam roughly represents a man in his mid-40s, only anthropomorphized as an animal, and McNutt, 13, 14-year-old boy. And so Tam is instilling characters. So when I did this painting, I said there has to be a better story to go along with this painting. And so what I did, I wrote the book based on this picture. And I set out and I wrote and I illustrated the entire story. So that's Tam O'Hare, as he appeared to my daughters when I first created him. And so Tam worked very hard to instill character in someone else, and I worked very hard to make this character be the things I was striving to be. I wanted to be a man of character. I wanted to possess the nobility and the honorability that Tam O'Hare possessed in the story. And so I wrote this all out. And a lot of my emotions got trapped in that story at the same time. I remember years later reading this story in a classroom to kids. And we spent 1 day a week for like 6 weeks and read the entire book to the kids at this school. And there were times where it choked me up and I had to stop and say, what did I write in there about myself or the things I'm striving for? So all of that to say, to make my point, that movie makers, storytellers, if they're thinking, they're instilling in their characters character traits. And so when you look to these standard figures, it allows the reader, the viewer, to assimilate the unfolding story by associating actions and events with highly consistent behavior patterns exhibited by the protagonists. And so when a particular character enters a scene, the reader, the viewer, has been trained to expect certain kinds of actions and interactions with the others. And so in some of the most famous modern stories, such as Star Wars, these standard characters are chosen from the archetypes of ancient mythology, which seem to run through most all cultures that are out there. The magical child archetype, presented in Star Wars as Luke Skywalker. The wise old man, presented as Obi-Wan Kenobi. The overpowering father as Darth Vader. And the innocent maiden as Princess Leia, all had the effect of conjuring up certain primal memories and reactions to viewers. And of course in the books they wrote as well. But another of the hugely popular fantasy stories, Star Trek, which I grew up on, the original, when I was a kid, it's built upon a set of cognitive archetypes, characters with distinctly different thinking patterns, more than on mythological templates. The Star Trek characters are distinctly different thinkers, and producer Gene Roddenberry used these patterns masterfully to show how the characters coped, individually, collectively, and with complex problem situations. So in order to see how these cognitive archetypes work, we need to take a quick review of cognitive variability. Remember that, cognitive variability. And so Rocky Stucci, if you're out there listening, Star Wars, ancient archetypes. Star Trek, ancient archetypes. There's something important here. So now there's a left brain, right brain difference here. Neuroscientists generally agree that the left side of the brain, the left hemisphere of the normal human brain, works mostly like a digital computer. It prefers to handle facts and figures, words, numbers, timing, sequences, procedures, logic, and rules. Now the right hemisphere, which is what I am, the right hemisphere, in contrast, works like an analog computer. It prefers to handle patterns, images, colors, sensations, spatial perceptions, sound, rhythms, intuition, hunches, and the interpretation of emotions. I tend to be more right brain than left brain. There are some people that can do both. Ambidextrous brains. I don't know that I have one of those. So this hemisphere difference is something that is actually very familiar to all of us. We often describe some people as being, oh, he's highly logical, analytical, and technical in the way he thinks. And these are the people with primary left brain preference or function. And we describe others as being highly intuitive. They tend to rely on hunches, visceral judgments, and the feel of things. These are people with a primary right brain presence. Something I've always said about myself, I'm a fairly pragmatic kind of guy. I like to see it, touch it, taste it, feel it, handle it, talk to it, in order to believe it, to trust it, to understand it. That's the way I am. And now there's an up and down difference. Cognitive psychologists also recognize a second important dimension. Again, with two contrasting patterns. This second key dimension is the contrast between abstract thinking, which is conceptual, hypothetical, speculative, and concrete thinking, direct, here and now experiences that can be verified with the senses. And so there's 4 cognitive archetypes. So we're going to get into combining these 2 bipolar dimensions, that's either side of the brain, not manic depression. Bipolar dimensions gives 4 combinations, each of which represents a unique different mode or style of mental processing. And to make these 4 thinking modes or styles easy to understand and remember, we can give them simple metaphorical names. Now, let's designate the left brain mode of thought blue thinking. Think of Spock's uniform, blue. And the right brain mode, red thinking. Well, now that's the engineer, Mr. Scott. That's all your dead security officers on Star Trek. Similarly, we can give simple metaphorical names to other dimensional and concrete and abstract levels. I call them Earth. And that's Earth thinking. And sky thinking. Respectively, Earth thinking is concrete, it's tangible, it's immediate, and results-oriented. Sky thinking is imaginary, hypothetical, conceptual. So now, we've broken that down. Use these metaphorical names for the 4 key styles we have. Red Earth is right-brained and concrete. Blue Earth, left-brained and concrete. Red sky is right-brained and abstract. Blue sky is left-brained and abstract. So we all use all 4 modes, of course, and most people tend to gravitate toward one particular mode early in life as kind of this home base preference that we have for how we think and how we see the world and how we construct our worldview and operate and cope within it. So an easy way to understand these 4 primary patterns is to think of them as analogous to 4 software windows on one's computer arranged by 2 by 2. And there are 4 different ways of processing the same information, such as with a word processor window, a graphic program, a spreadsheet, or a slide presentation. So understanding the key concepts of thinking style requires a clear understanding of each of these 4 patterns. Now, let's break them down. Here's how red earth people build their inner worlds. The red earth mode or pattern of thinking is characterized by these 4 things. Here and now, direct experience, use of intuition and hunches, orientation to feelings and vibrations. For people with the red earth preference, feelings are data, in a sense. Their feelings, the feelings of others, the effective tone of a conversation can be just as important as what's being said. And so they respond more strongly to the human logic of a case rather than the facts and the figures. Now, blue earth people build their inner worlds this way, and they're characterized by these 4 things. Bottom line orientation. Give me the facts, man. Facts and figures. Use of linear procedural thinking. An orientation to logical outcomes. Blue Earth thinkers tend to perceive emotions as noise rather than data. To persuade a Blue Earth thinker or to sell an idea to him or her, one has to present a logical case. They tend to look for evidence and logic. They're less attentive, or even indifferent sometimes, to the effective elementals of conversation. Now, red sky people build their inner worlds like this: big picture orientation, dreams and visions, use of hypothetical projective thinking, and orientation to possibilities. Red sky thinkers pay more attention to the why and the how, and the details of the situation usually don't interest them, and they may even bore them to tears. To explain or sell an idea to a red sky thinker, it helps to place it in a big picture context, something they can relate to on a conceptual level. And then there's your blue sky people, and this is how they build their inner worlds, characterized by the system orientation, diagrams and relationships, use of systemic analytical thinking. Not systemic, I wrote down systemic. Systematic analytical thinking, and orientation to structure and order. Blue sky thinkers tend to be system thinkers. They're inclined to plan, they organize things, they connect issues together into overall perspective, and to explain or sell an idea to a blue sky, it helps to draw pictures for them, especially timelines and diagrams. Now, how's all that work with Star Trek? Let's get back to Star Trek for a second. In the Star Trek episodes, we see Captain Kirk, who presents primarily as Red Earth thinker. He's the action guy. He's not a deep think specialist. He sizes up situations based on his experience and his personal judgments, and that's how he decides what to do, often on the basis of his finely tuned intuition, and that goes into his action. Mr. Spock, played by Leonard Nimoy, of course, we all know. In contrast, he's a Blue Earth, portrayed as the quintessential human computer. He's utterly indifferent to human emotions, and he concentrates on facts and logic. Now, we saw this character evolve over the decades into becoming a little less this way. But that's basically what Spock was. Dr. McCoy is the blue sky member of the team. He's calm, he's reflective, he's scientific and intellectual. He provides advice and wisdom to the ship's captain. Now, maybe calm as McCoy was always, "Damn it, Spock! I'm a doctor, not an elevator," whatever he says. And so he had his passions, but he basically presented calm, reflective, scientific points of view, advice, wisdom. Back in Kentucky, when I was a country doctor, we would just use a little bourbon or Tennessee whiskey to take care of that. But now we got all these gadgets and blah, 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 Dr. McCoy. So red sky characters are somewhat more difficult to spot in the USS Enterprise's regular crew, as they're in adventure stories. However, the later versions of the captain's character in Jean-Luc Picard, which you can see the series which picks up his life later in life, they tend toward the red sky pattern. Picard is a more philosophical, reflective, conceptual, and less impulsive leader than the former version played by William Shatner as Captain Kirk. Star Trek fans, Trekkies, now in their third generation, instantly recognize these and other characters largely because of the ways that their minds seem to work, just as much by their distinctive personality features. And there's a lot of Trekkies out there that will identify with one or more of these old Star Trek characters. And so after viewing a few of the entertaining Star Trek episodes, it's easy to see that creators deliberately put a complement of mixed personalities and thinking styles that contrast but also blend. And the twists and the turns of the various plots often bring these differences into play and provide an informative insight into their functioning as a team. Star Trek helps you when you're thinking about the whole idea of cognitive archetypes and building character. It's right there. Let's go out to break. We're going to come back with a little different twist on all of this. Sit tight. All right, folks, we're back. Thanks for sitting through that break. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid Radio Program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. You can also come over, see the show in simulcast in video, and join the live chat room during the show. And that's over at my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And join the other Intrepids in the channel. Have a good time over there. Meeting some new people. There's a good family of people over there, and I think you'll enjoy yourself. It's going on right now. So if you're just listening, go over and flip on your computer or look on your phone. Join the live chat as it's going, and you'll have a good time over there. All right. We were talking about Star Trek characters as cognitive archetypes, and I want to get into some other things about this. The cognition of building a better society. Let's get esoteric for a moment. Let's get outside ourselves. We're talking about ourselves with building character, but what's the point of building character? The point of building character is not just building a better self, but a better world around us. So it's character. It's a focus on self. Or is it a focus on others? Is it contagious? So I've been sympathetic to some criticisms of positive psychology as being too self-centered. Even last night, some people in the chat were like, oh, all this self stuff, is kind of where they're at. So it's all about loving self, huh? And yeah, that's part of it. That's focusing on how individuals and we as individuals can make ourselves happier or otherwise improve our own lives. And it can appear that positive psychology is kind of this continuation of a me, egocentric, self-indulgent culture. And there may well be those who are consuming information from this new discipline in that spirit. Oh, it's all about me. It's me first. And you know what? In relationships, when we say me first, it's really you first to do the work so you can contribute to the rest of the family or your partner or so on. So it's not about feeding ego. So there's this whole endeavor that I got into, maybe you can get into, that is about improving the world. And there's reason to be hopeful about it. I look at politics and I look at all the shit that goes on out there from day to day. And I've gotten to a point where I'm kind of tired of it. Now I'll talk about it and I'll opine on it. But I've gotten tired with the battling about it. You can't express an opinion without either being called a Nazi or being called a dumbass or something like that. And so that, after a while, you just go, you know what? Throwing my pearls to swine. And so I'm going to stop doing that. And so, I've backed off a little bit on political talk. I do a little bit of that with Rocky, but we have fun with it. So Albert Bandura, he made a foundational contribution to psychology in explicating the phenomenon of social learning. We learn so much by observing others around us, and we do much of this automatically. As I've read findings such as the recent study by Fowler and Christakis on the spread of happiness in social networks, or Haidt's research on the phenomenon of elevation, I start to wonder to what degree social learning is at work. When we do learn, we learn by seeing. I learn all the time by seeing. My kids learn by seeing. Your kids learn by seeing. You learn by seeing. So is it true that if we're happy, we make others around us happy? If we act altruistically, does it cause others to be more likely to do the same? Aren't we wired to look around and mimic the behaviors and mannerisms that seem to be valued in our immediate culture and that seem to produce these desired outcomes in not only ourselves but others? Though as conscious beings with free will, we might choose otherwise. We all tend to find our own social cultures to which we then adapt. And by adopting cultural values and behavior of that group that we're attracted to. So this is the basis upon which I have hoped that a focus on building and broadening individuals' use of character strengths are going to improve not just individual lives, but the lives of those around them, the people you rub shoulders with, the circles in which you hang, your social bubble. So from the beginning, the VIA Institute focused on identifying the basic elements of personality that account for most of what's best about human beings. And you have it in the back of your mind that building up and building upon character strengths would spread throughout the world via this process of social learning. One could only wish that. I've been in conversations with people from completely different cultural settings. If I were to label it, I'd say radical Islam a few years back. And we were talking, he was spouting his views, and I was expressing mine. And there were ways that I hoped I affected him. In that I talked about, you don't really want death on your children, do you? You don't want to pass that on to your kids. Why don't you pass on hope and peace and a way to make things better? And we got into a conversation that got pretty thick and heavy, and it was just in type. We were online, and he seemed to get it, which I don't know what he did with it or where he took it, because I've never encountered him again. Now, each time a person strengthens his or her own expression of character, that person, or us, we send a ripple effect to the social world. It's all around us. In a way, building a better world is not simply accomplished one person at a time, but instead is a process that leverages social networks and social learning. But it all starts with the individual. Additionally, this individual-based process of contagion for improving human easy for me to say, human character and the human condition and human behavior, is also interested in building better organizations, better communities, through a focus on character strengths. There's a guy out there, David Cooperrider, the founder of... I'm having a tough time talking here. I don't know what it is. I'm tangling my tongue. Appreciative Inquiry. And he's been pioneering this work with businesses, helping people consider their character strengths of their employees as they pursue their business goals and aspirations. And community organizers are exploring the extension of many people's work in this area. Look at the Fish organization out of the Pike Place Market in Seattle. We've talked about them before. There's strength work that's going on. Different people are doing this. So applying the knowledge of character strengths to personal growth organizational development, community organizing are ways that positive psychology is aiming far beyond egocentrism to the broader vision of creating a better world. And this is what I think we could all be about, creating the better world around us. And there are many things we can incorporate, and I'm looking at my time because I got like 10 different things up in front of me right now. The moments that make us who we are is something that I think about a lot. And I want to see which direction I want to go, because I could talk about marital conflicts and strength-based resolutions, but maybe we'll save that, because I want to get into this whole idea of how conflict is kind of the ultimate character development workout, but more so the moments that make us who we are. Life provides all these turning points of many kinds, but the most powerful of all may be character-revealing moments. And they go right to the heart of who we are as people and how we affect our social network, our social bubble, our community, our society around us. And so life provides a lot of these turning points. And so let me ask you, have you ever had if you thought right now, what is one of those defining moments of your life? What would you look back and say, that was a defining moment for me? Defining moments are usually character-revealing moments in our lives. In the middle of a date with her first boyfriend, I guess you'd call him. I'm using hypothetical names here, so be careful. I got to be careful. So in the middle of a date with her, first with Martin, Deirdre revealed an urgent phone call. Could she please do an immediate on-air radio interview? She had, after all, just written a well-received book about politics, so she's not so hypothetical, but I don't want to get into the personalities here, is my point. And there'd been big political news breaking all that week, and caught completely off guard, she agreed. She signaled to Martin, her first date, that she had on her first date with him, that she had to take a call. I got to take a call. And she moved to an empty corner of the restaurant to speak. 15 minutes later, she looked up. She saw that Martin was standing nearby as if guarding the space. Had he been there all along? Had he heard the whole thing? Before an embarrassed Deirdre could muster an apology for the professional intrusion on what she had hoped would be a romantic interlude, it had taken them 2 weeks of chit-chatting to find an unhurried afternoon to meet face to face. Martin spoke up. He said, "Look," he said, "I heard only half of your conversation, but I thought you were pretty terrific." "I'm so sorry to have inflicted this on you," she stammered. "No worry," he shot back. "I expect great things of people I hang around with." And so picking up the phone in the middle of a date or any other meeting was not part of this woman's usual repertoire. And in retrospect, she isn't even sure why she chose to take that call. But the incident was revelatory. And more than 10 years into their relationship, 10 years later, it still shines in her memory. And in a totally unforeseeable moment, she got a dazzling glimpse of what this guy, Martin, was made of. And what Martin was made of, beside quiet confidence, was an abundance of class, compassion, and kindness. In a word, he had character. And now there's moments that are so packed with meaning that they shimmer through time. And some inspire awe by exposing the splendor of nature. Some deliver a flash of insight to solve what seems like an inextricable problem. They're inherently transformative. They instantaneously expand awareness and alter one's sense of self. Psychologist Abraham Maslow coined the term peak experiences to suggest the inner magnificence of such rare and distinctive events in our lives. But there are also moments of great meaning that are more social in nature, that arise spontaneously on us. They hit us blindly out of left field and in the space between people. And such moments can shed this illuminating light on the deepest dimensions of a person's being. Arriving unheralded, they may accurately and acutely reveal a person's strengths, expose their vulnerabilities, unveil core convictions, divulge life values. They beget a profound state of knowing with searing speed. In an instant, Deirdre, in this story, apprehended that Martin was trustworthy. He was on her side, already a teammate, looking out for her, protecting her interests. Instead of taking offense that Deirdre's work intruded on their personal time or feeling intimidated by her professional stature, he acted with generosity and took it upon himself to put her at ease. And she knew the information revealed was completely authentic. It came totally unscripted. Martin stepped into an opportunity that would never have existed had he not summoned the courage and the kindness to carve it out. Such moments in our lives carry credibility, and precisely because they're not anticipated or prescribed. They are, however, transformative, and with their mix of insight and intensity, they give new life and new direction. And it forever can alter the path that you're on or the stream that you're going. It can alter the connections that we have with people and with each other, and often enough with ourselves. Of the various kinds of turning points life presents, the most powerful of all might be character-defining moments. And you might be able to define those as definitive moments, as I mentioned earlier, that you perceive in your own life. They go to the heart of who we are. And character hasn't been having an especially good run lately. You look at our politics. You look at things that are in the news. All of that stuff. In short supply on the national political stage, it's long been out of favor in the very field of knowledge dedicated to delineating human nature, overshadowed by flashier parts of personality. Character has, to a large degree, been left to the philosophers and the theologians. Character is a subset of personality traits, but there's been a long-standing neglect of character in personality psychology. And this was said by Jeffrey Goodwin, an associate professor of psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. He says that's been changing with the development of a new model of personality. So for decades, psychologists have subscribed to this 5-factor model of personality, a product of research in which myriad personal characteristics seem to naturally cluster into 5 broad traits in every one of us: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, that's not introversion, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. How many of you are neurotic? No, we all are, to a certain degree. That's the tendency to experience negative emotions and react poorly to stress. But in the early 2000s, Canadian psychologists Kibiam Lee and Michael Ashton identified a 6th major trait. They call it the H factor for honesty, humility. Honesty-humility is one thing. 2 qualities that their research shows travel together. Honesty and humility travel together. The H factor underlies people's approaches to money, to power, to sex. It governs their inclination to commit crimes or to obey the law. It orients them towards certain attitudes about society, politics, and religion. It influences everybody's choice, yours and my choices, of friends, of a spouse. So in short, it captures something fundamental about a person's adaptation to a shared world. The H factor sums up a person's willingness to exploit others or not exploit others. The honesty, humility factor, the H factor. Now, your level of H doesn't depend just on your genes and on your childhood. It also depends on your own free will. While this kind of work, this psychological scraping up of all this stuff, all these things that are identifiable in humans, so in this work, it made character scientifically admissible. It's also opened up the door to consideration of personality or personal responsibility. Personal responsibility. Something I've talked about, Rocky's talked about many, many, many times. For a long time, we threw personal responsibility out the window. But personal responsibility is all a part of this H factor. It's all a part of who we are, at least for some aspects of human behavior. A concept de facto, discredited by decades of biologic determinism. Biologic determinism, we are what we're made of biologically, and we have no personal responsibility. Until now, studying moral aspects of personality was deemed too subjective, too value-laden. And so alien was the topic that psychologists long considered morally relevant behavior as strictly a response to situations, not a quality arising from anything within us, and certainly not from something as stable as a personality trait. And so research now suggests it's the confluence of both. Like other traits, character is seen as a disposition that drives a person to behave in consistent ways in their life. But its specific mission is to allow us to evaluate the world and other people, to judge them. We're supposed to judge other people. They're what's a better word? Discretion. No, is that the word? Not discretion. It'll come to me. But judging people is we are looking at things and evaluating. That's judging things. Character has an inherently moral cast about it. If you have character, you have a morality about you. And there are some fuzzy borders between moral attributes and the personality traits of conscientiousness and agreeableness. But moral features extend beyond self-interest to interpersonal and societal interests. Character is king or queen in your life, depending on who you are, in social cognition. It's the first and the most important thing people actually perceive in others. They're rapidly gathering information about a person's kindness, their fairness, their honesty, their trustworthiness, and their loyalty. How could it be that no one was onto such prominent psychic players before? It's because in the world of psych research, many of the components of character were discounted as features of situations, not of people. And others were hidden behind theories of warmth and outgoing behavior. So contemporary psychology holds that the impressions we form of others are snapped together from quick estimations of two features, their warmth and their competence. But warmth is a nebulous notion. And when you analyze it, just what characteristics people identify behind warmth, you have to think of individuals that they knew close up and those they knew from afar. Look at George W. Bush. Look at Barack Obama. Look where you find kindness or humility, compassion, fairness, gratitude, empathy in our country's leaders. There were traits that were most powerfully predicted in the overall impression that subjects had of individuals. We can mistake social skills for character. And we can mistake the social for the pro-social. You look at a president like Barack Obama. Class. The man had a lot of class. Whether you liked his politics or not, he had a lot of class. Was that indicative of his character? That's a good question. Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, JFK, Donald Trump. You look at all these presidents that are leaders, if you want to look to that level and say, can we mistake social skills for character or lack of character? George W. Bush was a horrid public speaker, so his social skills probably weren't very good. Donald Trump's social skills probably aren't very good. He's kind of a blue-collar billionaire type. He'll get in a barroom brawl or a wrestling ring with you. Are these the things that are indicative of the deeper character of people? Now, I'm only using political leaders because it's easy, because we all have opinions about them. So despite having been discounted as products of specific situations, honesty, trustworthiness, loyalty, justness, the courage contributed most of all of the impressions subjects formed about others. Moral character is indeed the predominant determinant of global impressions. It actually drives how impressions are formed. Your moral character is your first foot forward, your first face forward. What's more, character traits are negatively dominant. A negative or immoral trait always seems to outweigh the presence of a positive moral trait on the impressions that we form. Say you've got somebody who is a great person of character with, let's just use some quick hypotheticals. They're great fathers, they're great mothers, they're great teachers, they're great this or that. But they could be screw-ups in finances. They could hurt people unwittingly with the way they conduct themselves in business matters. Things like that. So people of good character don't always have, and if you weigh them out, you could take everything positive about a positive person, and if they screw up financially, that's a negative character trait that will then place a red swash across everything else they do. Because why? Negatives seem to always outweigh positives. So a moral trait can outweigh the presence of a positive moral trait on the impressions that we form. One failure to recognize an injustice overshadows any number of good deeds. We see this all the time in politics. So when it comes to moral character, people are judged by their weakest link, and a transgression in the moral domain may be less subject to forgiveness than slip-ups in other realms. And you know what? We got to stop there. We're out of time for tonight. So I want to thank you for being here. We're going to talk some more about character tomorrow. Be prepared. Come with your iron panties on and your brass boxers and your thinking caps, and we'll go at it again. Thanks for being here. See you tomorrow night. Sit tight.